Welcome, Jim, to Metallarium Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Contrarian, this new album, Sage of Sekina, and more things related to the metal world. So we will starting with I think with one of the questions. So how has the band been during these 3 years? Because your previous album was released in 2020. Now 3 years later we have this new album. So perhaps this new album was composed during the pandemic, or perhaps it was during the sessions of the recording of the last album or the previous album. Sorry.
No, the album was written and recorded over the past year. We're pretty spontaneous when it comes to making music. In other words, going along with the namesake of the band, we don't use any software or computer programs to write the music. We really just do it old school. I'll record my riffs. I'll make a song out of them, and then we'll do the orchestration from there. Build the songs and everything. The way the songs are arranged and the way they are ordered, and the themes are all coming from me. And then I'm very privileged to have working with very talented musicians where we really build on the ideas.
Okay. Contrarian's music is one of those that has a lot of complexity. It is music there. There is a lot of things happen. Layers, textures, notes, schemes. It's very difficult to understand in one listen. You need to hear more than one. So how was the composition process of this new album? Or in general, how is the composition process of the Contrarian album like? Do you focus? What do you think in the technical and progressive stuff when you write new material? Or perhaps you have a natural development in this aspect?
Well, Contrarian, the songs for Contrarian, they're what you call growers, not showers in the music industry. So we write music that we'd want to listen to. So in other words, when music has that certain wow factor in it, it's fleeting, those are probably albums you would not revisit. Whereas if you are a real loving and serious music listener, you want an album that you want to go back to, you want to return to, that gives you that feeling of escapism when you listen to it. So Contrarian, and I've said this before, has always been about escapism. Just to put it on for 30 minutes and disappear into another world. And in order to do that, we felt the music needed layers. It needed little earworms that you would discover upon multiple listens. And so essentially we rewrite music we want to listen to. And this school of heavy metal, it's a natural succession to bands starting from late era period Death all the way going back to Iron Maiden albums and that natural sort of apostolic succession of metal guitarists, and that's what we enjoy. Without sounding too precious, it was very important to us to keep the intellectual leg of the genre we all love, and again, without sounding too serious, but that's what was fun for us. That's what we enjoyed.
Okay. So speaking of this one aspect that when a lot of musicians has these aspects when we talk about the living influence and feeling what happens internally and externally for the musicians. Many musicians say that they don't have a direction when writing music and carried away by the feelings that they have in the moment. As you told me, you create this new album spontaneously last year, record this album last year. So how do the parts of producing an album connect with the idea or sensation of it? Could we say that the music is a concept thinking, or perhaps the music is a concept not thinking? So because in some way you create the riffs with the sensations, with the feelings that you got in that moment, but at the same time you always thinking how many riffs will you put in this song for this much better development?
Again, like the way we write music is we while we're in the process of doing it, or if anything you have a passion for example, when you're in the process of doing it and you're suffering, you're like, I want to complete this project, I want to complete this work. It's not like you're doing it and you're happy. For at least for the people in Contrarian, it's a labor of love. And as you're doing the music, as you're writing the song, like the happiness of what you created descends upon you without you knowing it at a certain point, almost like grace. You know what I mean? You're not aware of it until it actually happens to you. And when we write Contrarian, not only is that how it happens, but we keep it kind of dirty, the production. If you listen very closely to Contrarian, you'll hear like a guitar squeak here and a bass squeak there, okay. Or a rattle of a tom hitting a cymbal stand or something of this nature. And it's funny because we'll be with the producer and he's like, oh, we got to clean that up. I'm like, no, leave that there, leave that there. We want that there. Yeah. So this goes part and parcel with this whole new sort of approach to writing technical music, where you quantize and you sound replace things, but the music becomes too sterile at some point and it's lifeless and you lose the human aspect. So that's why I think we get a lot of, you kind of sound like 90s progressive death metal. And the answer is yes, because that was a time before all this dramatic production was going on. I mean, extreme production, I should say. So we wanted to keep it natural. We wanted to keep it human.
Okay, nice. So I know every album is special for you, and the most bands in the world say that the last album is always their best efforts until to date. So let me ask, what does album means in Contrarian's career? How much did the feelings you have and the way you compose change compared to the times when you released Polemic in 2015?
Well, the first EP, I believe, was released in 2013-14, and the first full length was 2015. Yeah. So, you never want to make the same album twice, of course. That was always our motto. And if you go back, and I'm happy about this, if you go back and you look at our discography, now it makes sense. Initially, people were like, oh, this album sounds a little different than this one, and this album sounds a little different, but it always sounded like Contrarian. And that was always the objective. Ultimately.
Okay. Well, since the beginning, since Polemic, your first album, you always do the albums with your pals or with your members, because in the first album you have a lot of 3 guitars at that time. Then the album next, same members. But this is the first album that you all record everything by yourself, because according to the promotion, you say the all songs written by you, just by you. So how do you experience works for you to work by yourself everything?
Well, it was always like that from the beginning. I just don't think we kind of stated it clearly. Yeah, we didn't think it was that important, really. I mean, at the end of the day, all the arrangements are done by the band. The riffs are written by me. The songs are laid out by me. The order, everything. It was always me. It was the prime mover. And then it was kind of adding on, piling on, topping on, however you want to see it. So that system of writing music was always like that. So in that, you can see, I hope you can see some of my personality in the band and the music.
Yeah. Since the beginning to now, you have. If you told me that you've composed all songs since the beginning to now, so you are all sensations I got since the first time. So speaking of one topic, so the sensations of this new compared to their first, the fans and critics always say that the band's first album are the best. And the funny thing is that usually for the bands, as I said, their last word is the best word to date. So, and maybe you think like this because you are fan of the metal, jazz, blues, and more genres that your first artist your first influence, you think that the first album for that artist are the best words to date. So, what are your opinion about these statements of the fans and critics that they say the first two or the first one or the previous album is the best work to Contrarian to date? And perhaps you have developed new ideas with more music, with etc. etc.
Well, when it comes to heavy metal, even from its grassroots, the genre was always based on the craft competence of the players. It was always forward movement. For example, take Iron Maiden. You'll start with the initial album and then get all the way to something like Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. You'll see growth and progression from more simplicity to more complex. Same thing if you take a band like Death. You'll see the first album, Scream Bloody Gore, and then you'll compare it to something like Individual Thought Patterns, and it's irrecognizable. So I think it's a natural thing for true, authentic metal to progress in this way, to start from the core and build on it with more maturity, more ornamentation. Now, it's comparing apples to oranges. Is the first album the best, or is the last album the best? You could say, well, I just want a straight cheeseburger. But then you might say, oh, I want a cheeseburger with some onions and peppers and extra sauces and this and that. So I think it's more about what mood you're in when you're specifically visiting a band or going to a specific restaurant, for example, for an analogy. So I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, well, okay. So other aspect of this one, returning to the album, other aspect that captured my attention of this new one is the meaning of sekinan. So, I try to find some founds of information about the sekinan, and perhaps I'm wrong of this aspect. So for that, what is exactly meaning that siege of the sekinan? Because I tried to relate with some games, because when I saw the cover art, I all the time a lot of Giger influence, so a lot of there into there. So what is exactly conception that you put in this Sage of the Second, talking about the lyrical aspect?
Okay, so on this album in particular, if you look at the album titles, most of them have to do with either theologians or philosophers who in some way or form were exiled or isolated or not so much controversial, but just certain situations like that. And Sage or Shekinah is basically Shekinah is like a feminine version of a divinity, theologically speaking. So, in that it is contrarian. So, we all our albums and our albums covers go around our mascot, the hooded guy you see on all the albums, and we kind of write stories around that. Subjectively, not objectively. But this album is really, if you dive deep into the lyrics, you're kind of getting into tangent, angled versions of theology coming from, Greek history, Arab history, Hebrew history. So we like, we just intellectually, we like, delving into those topics of metaphysics and theology and philosophy. And, obviously they make for great, concepts for metal albums. There's no doubt about that. The two go part and parcel. So we played around with those concepts, made little stories. And again, not trying to make any point or anything like that, or point of view, or we're just using it completely for escapism, like I said before.
Okay. So the next question I think will be one of the difficult ones, because usually now the new forms of hearing music by this new generation is to return to the past, like the 40s and 50s, when the music spread just by singles at that time. Now we are returning to this aspect again. thanks to the digital platforms, when you select one, two, or maximum three songs from an album, and they love to do the playlist now. So if we relate it as which song from this stage of Sekina capture whole essence for whole album, it's very difficult, but it's the new way.
I think the two singles, the one single I think will be most accessible to a listener would be there's the second single called "The Zabur of Sophia Al Shamal." It's the second single, song number 5 on the album. I think that would be a good one to catch. It's very layered but catchy at the same time. Contrarian albums aren't really meant to be released. Again, I'm kind of comparing this to Iron Maiden a lot, but they're never really meant to be released as singles. When you listen to Iron Maiden, you say, "Oh, I'm going to listen to Power Slave," or "I'm going to listen to Somewhere in Time." You don't say, "I'm going to go listen to The Duelists," or "I'm going to go listen to Stranger in a Strange World." You kind of pick the album because the album is it's like a half an hour show that you get into, and you put yourself in the mindset and go from there. So it's the same thing with Contrarian. When we were on tour with Atheist and Suffocation, and we were the opening act, support for them along with Surruption, we'd open the show and we'd get this situation at the merchandise booth where we didn't really get people buying one of this or one of that. They'd come in, like every night there'd be 2 guys, 3 guys that just come in and be like, "Give me your whole discography. I want it now." And they'd buy like $200 worth of CDs or something like this. They wouldn't just nitpick singles or specific albums. And every night with it was a real cool thing to see, and we appreciated it. We met a lot of cool people, and it was great.
Okay. So we are very close in this interview for that, and for this aspect. So, well, now we'll talk a little for the last questions of for the album. So, what are the future plans that the band has for this new album? Perhaps more videos upcoming. Perhaps you prepare more tours in Europe, North America, or perhaps who knows, your first Latin American tour.
Yeah, we obviously we just got done with the tour in the summer of 2022 with Suffocation and Atheist. So that was great because that really was a good place to present our music to the public. The album's coming out obviously in a week, this March 17th. Not this Friday, the following Friday. The album will be out completely, full stream. From there, we'll let the new album sink in. And we are definitely will be looking to tour and support the album. It has to be the right tour with Contrarian, though. It has to be the right demographic. It has to be the right mindset. Of late, you've probably seen these tours where they're, mixed bags of, some old school death metal and then a deathcore band and then something totally obscure. That could work. I don't know. Touring has changed, obviously, since COVID. And we'd love to find the proper package to get on and do Europe, since we've done US twice now, and of course Latin America.
Great to know. So talking about other aspects, as I said in the first question, you remember when I got now 43 years old, so I'm an old guy, prefer to do a lot of music, but I know a lot of bands in the 90s, 2000s, and a lot of people thinks, I remember when Opeth appears in the world, Cynic appears in the world, and a lot of American media say that these bands are playing progressive death metal. Always for me, these bands never play progressive death metal, more like progressive metal than the death metal into there. So they have some schemes, some elements of death metal. So now, when I hear your music since the beginning to now, I denoted that this influence came from your Nocturnus, from Atheist, from the 90s scenes, especially in the progressive death metal, technical death metal. So what is your opinion at that time when perhaps you hear Opeth and Cynic, like the first two bands that play progressive death metal. And now when a lot of changes, a lot of water pass down the river or down the bridge, and now a lot of things happen, new bands, more information coming up, etc., etc. Do you still think that the Opeth and Cynic was the first band into the progressive death metal, or perhaps you have your opinion at that time when you hear for the first time this style?
Oh, of course. I mean, the progressive death metal that you're speaking of, these bands that came out in the mid to late 90s, and I'm old too. I'm in my 40s too, so I'm with you. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So a lot of people say like, oh, Contrarian, they sound like they came from the 90s, and it doesn't sound like they're mimicking or copying. It sounds modern, but it sounds so 90s, so old school. It's like, yeah, because we're old, essentially, when it comes to this. So, but the thing that you should take into mind, and this might not daunt you, the technology back then, you couldn't do the production tricks you do now. I remember recording demos in the 90s, and you had to get it right from beginning to end, or you had to start from the beginning and doing it. There was no punching in and punching out. There was no quantizing. There was no sound replacing on the drums, lining everything up so it sounded perfect. It was either you got it. I mean, go listen to an Atheist album like Unquestionable Presence from 1992 or 3, whenever it was, and Individual Thought Patterns, and put a click track to it. It doesn't line up because there is no click track to it. It was done with essentially a conductor being the rhythm guitarist or the bassist, however the song was structured. So when this was taken away, because it was so easy to take away, the term progressive and technical kind of got generic. I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. But again, these are the musicians. The thing that should be said is that back in the 90s, you couldn't find musicians to play this music. Now, as a result of this, it's amazing. Like, these younger kids are 10 times better the guitarist than I am or ever will be. I mean, you see these young dudes, in their 20s, just, they could play everything. And it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
Okay. So now I remember when Contrarian appeared in 2015 with the first album. There is a few bands that are into this aspect, technical progressive, because this technical progressive movement is 10 years ago with a lot of bands, because before the 2010, there's no bands, more brutal bands, more deathcore bands, more slamming. I remember that era at that time. But from 2010 to now, there's a lot of bands. Now, what is your opinion about that? Now, I think this style is too saturated in some ways to express new ways to hear or to create technical progressive death metal.
Yeah, there is a situation where it's kind of saturated, or not kind of, it is saturated. Again, this goes back with the technology, being able to record an album on the computer, being able to conduct music with programs and software. My only recommendation to these newer technical bands who are amazing musicians, amazing guitarists, put some of that spontaneity I was talking about in the beginning of the interview. Let it go. Don't try to control everything. Let the human side of the music come through. Keep it natural. Record traditionally. Yeah, you can clean some stuff up here and there, and of course, and it's busy music. That's understandable. But to the best as you can, try to keep it natural, organic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to this aspect, well, you know about the artificial intelligence now more present into the arts in general, because last year appears well, like software create art, you doing just a couple of words into the in a box, and this art in the this software create art for you. That's important now. Now, so but related to this, the artificial intelligence is now more present with the artists or the musicians because a lot of musicians now play with drum machines, now bass machines, keyboard machines, a lot of other artificial intelligence with music now in general in the art. So perhaps what is your opinion about now the artificial intelligence is more present into the music because it's not like the 80s, not like the 90s, even not like the 2000s at the beginnings of 2000s when no artificial intelligence is present. Now are just more real this aspect.
Yeah, yeah. Again, there's thankfully there's been kind of a resurgence of even making it more natural than production that even Contrarian is. If you go to these dissonant death metal bands, like I know Colin Marston, he produced Gorguts and Artificial Brain. These bands, Sunless, these types of bands, and they were keeping it very, very natural. It's really cool, and I totally appreciate it because this is a funny story. The application on your phone, you can get Face App, where you take the photo and you can yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So someone made an analogy to me. When you take music and you quantize it and you sound replace it and all this types of stuff, it's almost like you're face apping a photo to the point where you don't even recognize the person anymore. You're like, who is this? You're like, it's like, and doing that in the studio to your music is basically essentially you're face apping your music. And yeah, so it's great that there is a movement to get away from this artificial production and sounds, and I think it's absolutely great.
Okay, and one of the last questions before we finish. So, yeah. How many guitars do you have now? Because I saw more than more than 10 guitars, and a curious thing. A lot of people that I know, like a big guitar player around the world, they love to collect a lot of guitars. And perhaps do you use more than one guitar to record this new album from Contrarian?
Well, there's a couple ways to look at this. There's a saying that every guitar has a song inside of it.
Yeah.
So you could say. So you could say, and that's that rings true, because when you get a new piece of guitar in your hand and you become inspired, you're excited. It's fresh. So that's one way of looking at it. Also, it's it's the collecting aspect of it. I was more into it. I had quite a bit. I won't go to how many I had, but a lot. So during COVID and during inflation, I kind of got rid of some of them because it was just the temptation was too much, because I had been sitting on a lot of guitars since the 90s. And I got to the point where my mentality changed a little bit, where I was like, if my hand didn't reach for the guitar, then I felt like I was doing that guitar injustice, just leaving it in a case or on my wall. So I decided to kind of change mentalities and kind of lean out the herd, so to speak.
Okay. Well, nice to hear. So, well, Jim, the sad times arrived at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one like me. Terrific guy. Well, a lot of guitars in your background. I really love that picture. So, congratulations on the new album. It's a great one. We did a review in our Metalerio. It's posted I think one week ago. So perhaps we want to add something to your Latin American fans that expect someday Contrarian here in Latin America and Metalerian followers.
Yes, I saw the review and I absolutely appreciate it. It means so much to us that people take the time to listen and try to understand our music. That's one of the most gratifying things. Latin America, I've been to all over, from Mexico to Costa Rica to Colombia to Brazil. Absolutely love Latin America, and what's the best part about them is the metal fans. The metal fans in Latin America are amazing. It's even better than Europe, I would have to say. And their knowledge of the music and their dedication to the music and the genre and the scene and keeping it vibrant and authentic and fresh is great. There are so many unknown bands from Latin America that I wish would had more exposure. I hope one day to tour Latin America very soon.